This is poetry lesson number 4. This lesson will focus on the poetic form called a quatrain. Of all the forms of poetry you need to know, we've talked about haiku, limerick, free verse, and couplets. We'll talk about a ballad next, and this one is a quatrain. You need to be able to understand what makes a quatrain, how to recognize one, and why an author might choose to write one instead of another form. The quatrain is really pretty simple. Quad means 4, like a quad ATV or a quadrilateral has 4 sides, so stanzas of a quatrain contain 4 lines. There may be one stanza, or there may be many, many more stanzas. There's no set number. The only stipulation is it has to have 4 lines per stanza. It may rhyme, or it may not. Most quatrains you're probably going to read will be rhyming, but it doesn't have to. The only requirement is it has to have 4 lines per stanza. Here's an example of a pretty famous quatrain by Langston Hughes. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow. How many stanzas are in this poem? The answer is 2. Hold fast to dreams starts each stanza for some repetition. Does this poem rhyme or not? The answer is yes. So take a second and try to label the rhyme scheme. You're looking at the word dreams, die, bird, and fly. And then dreams, go, field, and snow. You label rhyme scheme by the last word in each line. Another example of a quatrain is one by Henry Van Dyke called The Empty Quatrain. A flawless cup, how delicate and fine the flowing curve of every jeweled line. Look, turn it up or down, it's perfectly still, but holds no drop of life's heart-warming wine. This one may seem written a little bit differently, but first thing is notice if it rhymes. If so, label the rhyme scheme. What do you notice about this quatrain that's different than the first example, the Langston Hughes example versus this more modern Henry Van Dyke example? What do you notice that's different? And second thing, very simply, what makes this poem a quatrain? This is your last quatrain example and some reflection questions. Crazy Thoughts number 1 by Jack Ellison. Why do they call it tourist season if you're not allowed to shoot them? Seems like a great opportunity to end the overcrowding problem. If a housefly loses both of its wings, would we have to call them walks? Is it possible to have a civil war? Of course. That's not just silly talk. Any idea what the best thing was that came before sliced bread? If a turtle somehow loses its shell, is it homeless, naked, or dead? I find this saying quite unnerving. Practice is what doctors do. And Braille on drive-through windows, find that kind of scary, don't you? If a parsley farmer ever gets sued, can they legally garnish his wages? Well, that's enough of the silly talk. At times, I go through these phases. Please reflect on this quatrain and answer the questions, comparing and contrasting to previous lessons too, so use your notes. First of all, how many stanzas are in this quatrain? Is this a rhyming quatrain or not? And if so, label the rhyme scheme in each stanza. How does this quatrain, or any quatrain, contrast to a limerick? How is a quatrain different from a limerick? What is one way a quatrain compares to a haiku? How is it similar? There's not a lot of similarities, but come up with at least one way a quatrain is similar to a haiku. And then just kind of reflect, do you like the longer or the shorter quatrains? You have examples of both on this one, and explain why. Which one would you rather read as a reader of poetry? When you're finished with all of this, bring your notes to your teacher so it can be checked and see if you can move on from quatrains.